I'm Florrie. I'm Manager of Innovation Programs here at Public. And today I'm going to be speaking to Rikesh Shah, Director of IPEC and all-round Smart Cities expert, to talk about our reflections from the recent Smart Cities World Expo in Barcelona. For those of you who don't know, the Smart Cities Expo is one of the world's largest convenings of city leaders, technology experts, and innovation leaders coming together to make smart cities a better place for people to live in. So Rikesh, lovely to have you here. Lovely to catch up after a busy couple of days at the conference.
Yeah, lovely to be here.
Thank you. And it would be great to hear kind of what were your reflections from the event? What were your key takeaways?
Yeah, I think it was a really interesting week. And what I really like about Smart Cities, and again, this year was the same, is it convened city leaders with some of the best innovators in the world, with academic institutes, and everyone's convening around solving particular problems in both at local, regional, and a national level that we all need to be solving.
And do you think this year was particularly different? Was there anything new this year that has come forward maybe that was different from other years?
Yeah, I think a couple of things stand out. Firstly, cities were convening much more to talk about their challenges. And secondly, I think the market, particularly the innovation community, were bringing solutions that were less hype and much more real. So we're seeing real case studies, real life examples in cities across the world where they were solving problems in a new way.
Okay. Actually, one of the key kind of takeaways for me was a lot of the conversation was around data sharing, breaking kind of data silos. Is that something that you've kind of seen real practice of?
Yeah, I mean, my background is at Transport for London, and Transport for London is incredibly data rich. And it's critical, despite having all that data, you need to know what to do with it. And some of that's about running your operations more effectively. Some of it's about planning for the future. And a lot of it is around driving better customer experiences. And certainly what I'm seeing more and more is by having all these different data sets is how do you use it in the right way for better outcomes and creating more value.
Learning from your experience working at TfL and doing a lot of work, particularly on open data, how do you think cities can move from talking about open data initiatives to actually putting it into practice?
Yeah, look, I think the role of data is critical. You know, in an organisation like Transport for London, it's about running your operations more effectively. It's also about planning for the future and creating the right services. And it's also about producing the right customer outcomes. And with a lot of the open data that we had and we released, it created over 700 apps powered by TfL data. So for many customers out there who are using Citymapper, Google Maps, and some of the other products, it was as a result of our open data. And what I would encourage other cities to think about is not just about how much data you have, but how do you use that data? And some data is closed for good reasons. You know, it could be HR data, it could be commercially sensitive data, but a lot of the data can be open. And by making that data open, cities can share some of their problems and their challenges and let the academic world, the innovation community, and others get around the data, look at some of the problems that you're trying to address, and come up with new solutions. So I think one piece of advice I'd give to cities is be really clear on what data you have and what data should you be releasing for better outcomes.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about innovation communities there, and I think that's something that's really exciting. And a lot of the kind of bubble and talk that was going on is how cities can build kind of better living labs, better innovation centres. And I think one of the best examples that I heard of was from Sunderland City, which was one of the award winners nominated for an award. And one of the ways that they've done really well is particularly building public-private partnerships. And you've done a lot of work with local authorities, you've done a lot of work with innovators. What do you think is the kind of key to making those public-private partnerships successful?
Yeah, I think Sunderland's a great example. And there were other examples that I heard about in Barcelona. And I think some of the key ingredients is how do you sort of share your problems with the market? And then how does the market respond by addressing your problems? And far too often, I see overprescribed solutions coming from the city. Or on the other hand, I see the market, the innovator, demonstrating their pitch deck and then saying, what do you want to buy? And I think it's about how do you get together and say, these are my problems, these are the solutions, and how can I design the solution that fits perfectly for the city? So you're in a much more co-designed position. Mm-hmm. And as a result, you're experimenting, you're trialing, and hopefully out of that scenario, some things come through that add real value and solve those problems. So I think we need a new paradigm shift really around how does the public and private sector work together to achieve better outcomes.
And do you think that this is something that cities need to do individually, or do you think it's better if they link and talk. And I think a great thing that the Expo does is making sure that cities are learning from one another. What benefits do you think there are of something like that, where cities are able to talk to one another?
I think it's absolutely critical cities should be talking to one another, because a lot of the problems that they're facing are quite similar. The context might be different at a local level, but some of the challenges around the climate emergency, aging population, adult social care, child services, these are challenges that we're seeing across Europe. And I think the more the cities talk to each other around how are you approaching these challenges, how are you working together by bringing more innovation in, and you share that amongst the community, what we will do is accelerate some of that learning. And as a result, you achieve better outcomes much, much faster.
Mm-hmm. So obviously we can't talk about a big conference without talking about AI. And there was a lot of conversations around AI, particularly how it can support with data management, mobility, logistics. And I want to hear your opinion on what do you think the greatest opportunities are for AI, and where do you think actually it might be causing more risk?
Yeah, and a lot of it comes to hype, because lots of people have different definitions of AI. And frankly, sometimes people just relabel what they were doing before and turn it into an AI solution. So I think the first thing is demystifying the hype. I certainly saw lots of use cases around mobility in particular and AI. And a couple of areas where I saw value being added is around logistics and how do you optimize parking in cities. Because what we know is with the demand for logistics services has increased significantly with 24-hour, 7 days a week society now when it comes to deliveries, that there's more demand for space. And some of the things that I saw there around solutions where you can pre-book spaces, you can optimize spaces, you can do better enforcement and compliance. I thought that was really interesting and a real near-term solution that can add value. Of course, in the wider mobility space, how do you optimize traffic flow? How can you support digital signaling? And some of the other areas in that space was also very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And actually it brings to mind some of the biggest uses of AI being supporting the use of IoT infrastructure, as you mentioned, and particularly some of the conversations I heard around digital twins. So Birmingham City Council were talking about the digital twin they've got in place, particularly for mobility, managing air quality, managing traffic flow, as you said. So I'd be really interested to hear your thought, particularly about where digital twins can also add real value.
And again, people are starting to talk about digital twins more and more. And I think, if there's a digital twin, ideally you want as little or as few digital twins as possible in a system. And as a result, to do that, you need to make sure the data is interoperable. So I think we need some of the basic foundation layers in place, which is single source of truth with the data. Is the data interoperable? How is this data connecting with each other in terms of the different sensors that you might have on the network? And then how do you replicate a real picture in a virtual world so you can make better decisions, both in terms of scenario planning, but also operationally. So I think certainly the opportunity is there, but we do need the right culture, the right systems in place for people to optimize the value of a digital twin.
I think what was really interesting is it being a World Congress is seeing some of the amazing things that other cities around the world were doing. And you see Saudi Arabia using extraordinary levels of tech and Rome winning awards for their innovation. Do you think there are ways that UK cities can learn from what other cities are doing around the world?
Yeah, I was fortunate to chair the Chief Innovation Officers session on the role of AI and innovation. And what was really interesting, you're right, there are some great examples taking place from across the world. But also what was interesting is some of the UK regional bodies and local authorities are also doing some really good stuff. And a couple of examples that I heard about is, how Birmingham's thinking about the role of AI and digital twin. Similarly, Manchester and Lottie in London. So we're doing some really good things. And I think that's what this session was about, is how can we learn from each other to avoid duplication? And as a result, accelerate some of the innovation that's out there that can create value. So it's quite nice to see both international cities showcase some of the best practice, but also similarly the UK cities doing the same.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think what was a really nice feeling, certainly for me coming away, was seeing those conversations happen, and particularly speaking to some leaders of kind of city councils in the UK, coming away with real connections with people from other countries that they were excited to engage in. So yeah, I guess to kind of wrap up, if you could have one key takeaway from this year, and one thing that you think should be taken forward into next year and you hope to see built upon.
So one thing that I heard about more and more is how do we use procurement more effectively to scale the innovation? And how do we move out of the sandbox to actually creating citizen value? And that's about achieving better outcomes. And the conversation I heard again and again, both on the private side, but also on the city side, is how can we use procurement as a strategic tool to actually scale the innovation? And as a result, achieve better taxpayer value.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's been great speaking to you, and I'm looking forward to next year.
Thank you.